Hello, welcome to Pen and Paper ASMR. Today I wanted to talk about pens. Pens are something I really enjoy. They are, it's one of those nerdy things, I guess, but I really do love a good pen. And when you're looking at pens, or maybe you're talking with someone who doesn't know that much about pens, sometimes you'll say something that maybe someone else might not know about, just because general pen knowledge probably isn't the most common thing to have. Obviously almost everybody writes with pens, day-to-day life, at home, at work, at school. There's tons of purposes for a pen. However, there are the differences between types that can help you pick which kind you like. And so I wanted to go over 3 types today, just briefly, nothing crazy. And the first is ballpoint, the second is gel, and the third is rollerball. Now, to start off with, all 3 of them are going to be very similar in how they actually function. I believe all of them, from a mechanism perspective, so how the pen actually works, I believe they all function the same way. Or basically at the end of your pen, if you ever look, there's a tiny metal ball in that tip, and as you write, it rotates, and part of it's connected to the inkwell at the back, and the other part is making contact with the paper. So as you write, that ball rolls into the ink in the inkwell and then back onto the paper, and that's how you get your writing. So to help us differentiate from there of what goes with what, we're just going to use my desk as like the table. Well, the desk is a table, but like a grid table. So let me write these out really quick. So number 1 is ballpoint. So we have ballpoint, and we'll stick him up here. Then in the middle, and we'll kind of talk about why it's in the middle, is gel. And then the last one is called rollerball. Let's put it here. Okay, so there's our labels. Okay, so the first way that we're going to differentiate is based on the actual ink composition. So I'm going to go through what each one is made of, and then I'll explain it a little more. So starting with ballpoint, the easiest way to break it down for the sake of this video is ballpoint is dye plus alcohol. Okay. So when you write with a ballpoint, that ink is made of dye and alcohol. When you use a gel pen, you're writing with pigment plus water. Okay. which is kind of a combination of the two. And rollerball is dye plus water. Okay. So, with these three, when we think about dye, again, most simple way to put it is that dye is going to be a chemical compound. So this is going to be, it's different than a pigment, which is a powder. So just think dye is a chemical compound, and then pigment is like a powder. So you can think of like when you dye, like tie-dye clothing, you're using that liquid dye that will stain, compared to if you put on eyeshadow and you get pigment on your brush for eyeshadow, that's the powder. You're not going to be dyeing your eyes, and you're not going to be sprinkling tie-dye with powder, but that's kind of the difference there. And then the reason that Ballpoint has alcohol and gel and rollerball use water is that along with the dye and the alcohol, there's a couple other things, and those things make Ballpoint ink the thickest. And so for the ink that's really thick to come out, it uses an alcohol solvent most of the time that will evaporate almost immediately. And so that's why Ballpoint ink, it will sometimes skip because it's going to be a little thicker, but that's also why it dries so easily, especially compared to gel and rollerball. And so now gel, using pigment and water, that's going to be the reason that it skips a little more, because instead of liquid dye, you have your pigments, which still, obviously, it's not like it's grainy in the ink, but it can cause gel pens to clog easier than rollerballs. So that's why gel's kind of in the middle. It's a little thicker than a rollerball, but definitely not as thick as a ballpoint. And then a rollerball, you're thinking almost more like a fountain pen type of ink. So you just have your dye and your water. This one's going to be very free flowing. And so that is going to also determine the viscosity. So a lot of the times you will hear pens have low viscosity ink. That is kind of a selling point, because that means that it's not going to get stopped up as easy. So when we're looking at a ballpoint, that's going to be the highest viscosity, this is not what people who make the pens would say, but this is just for comparison's sake. So then gel would be medium viscosity. Okay. And then you probably guessed it. Your rollerball is going to be your lowest viscosity, just because of the nature of the ink. And really, when you're writing, it's just referring to how easily does the ink flow out of the pen. Does it have a lot of skips? Does it just flow very smoothly? Does it take a lot of pressure, which a ballpoint typically will? Does it just require a really light touch? That's going to be more like a rollerball, okay? And so that's thinking this is how it's made up. this is the result of that makeup. Okay, and then we're going to do the drying time. Now this one can be a little different because really it's, especially between these two, they're going to be close. But ballpoint is almost always going to be the fastest drying. Okay. And then for gel and rollerball, I'm just going to write Tide. Well, no, gel still dries a little faster, so I'm actually going to write dries slightly faster than rollerball. And remember, that difference also comes from how it's made. So, pigment in water is going to dry differently than dye in water. And then rollerball is the slowest drying. Okay, so these are really the differences in how they perform and how they're made up. Again, you might be a true pen expert and you might be looking at this thinking this is too oversimplified. This is a very simple explanation. If I get anything wrong, please let me know. But from what I have been reading, this is what I found. And also from personal experience. But especially since I really only have room for one more sticky note, I'm going to do, I guess you could call it highlights, or maybe good uses, or just notes that would further separate them. So starting with ballpoint. So we'll just make little bullets. So ballpoint, from my understanding, I'm obviously right-handed. Ballpoints are better if you're left-handed. And when you think about it, that makes sense because they are the fastest drying. And so I do know that people who are left-handed typically have the complaint of it's smudging on their hand as they write because their hand drags across. When I, like on my fingers right now, I get ink on it. That's literally user error. I smudged it with my finger. But left-handed people don't really have that choice. So I did read that ballpoints are better if you are left-handed. And I also saw that these run out of ink the fastest. And then one other key point that I saw for ballpoint is that you can write on almost anything. So let's see. Okay. And the reason it will write on most anything, it's again if you're putting the pieces, oh goodness, if you're putting the pieces together as we go across the desk, So I put dye and alcohol, but really ballpoints are going to also be, they're oil based. So that's why the alcohol is needed, because the dye and the oil are very thick compared to water. But there are some things that water is meant to bead off of. An example, if you ever have like a plastic gallon baggie, I think of freezer bags, where you're wanting to save food for later and you have to write the date, you need a Sharpie or like a ballpoint pen, because that plastic isn't going to work well with water on it. Same thing with like maybe tape. Tape is typically a slicker, non-porous surface, so there's nowhere for the water in gel and rollerball pens to go. So that's why ballpoints can write on just about anything, including like receipts, glossy papers, things like that. Alright, and now next is gel. I'm almost out of green sticky, so it's probably good that we're almost done. So gel, really, like I said, they can skip more often, but also because it's a pigment, you have vivid, basically unlimited, unlimited colors. And that's if you think about the packs of gel pens that are like 36, 50, 100. Really, that is possible because of how that's formulated compared to a dye. A pigment can produce a more vivid color, as well as a wider range of colors. Okay, and then last one is rollerball. So let's see. I think I actually mixed two up. So I put runs out of ink the fastest for ballpoint, and in my notes I actually meant rollerball, and it makes a lot of sense. So it actually, this one should be the slowest. Well, that's right. So it runs out of ink the slowest, again due to the nature of the ink. Sorry. Like I said, if you're a pen expert, you might be thinking, what is she talking about? Okay, rollerball is actually the one that empties the fastest. And it's because of how free-flowing the ink is. It's the smoothest for the same reason. And often it is noted that because of how, especially it's similar to a fountain pen, the rollerball requires the lightest touch. Okay. Okay, so here are all of our pen notes. This obviously is not all of the detail that you could go into about these pens, but it does give a pretty simple overview of the ballpoint, gel, and rollerball pens. Okay, so reading this way, ballpoint, the ink is made of dye, alcohol, and it is oil-based. That results in it having the highest viscosity, also being the fastest drying. It's better if you're left-handed. It runs out of ink the slowest, and it will write on almost anything. Gel is the one made of the pigment and water. It's between the three. It's the middle, with it being the medium viscosity because of its makeup. It dries slightly faster than a rollerball. It can skip more often because the pigment can technically clump in the water, and it has the most vivid and basically unlimited color palette. Then a rollerball. This is the one you're thinking closest to a fountain pen in a normal pen body, and that's made up of dye and water for its ink, resulting in the lowest viscosity, meaning it's also the slowest drying, and it empties the fastest. It is the smoothest, and it requires the lightest touch. Okay, so if you have any other fun pen facts, let me know. If I missed anything besides this fact right here, let me know that as well. And otherwise, I just want to thank you so much for watching if you made it this far, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye!